Hello, welcome back to Racecraft. And yes, it's more Scorpions. And as you can see, I've got them stacked up. But this build's going to be a little bit different. It's not another Windsor into Scorpion or Windsor into Sigma. This time, we're actually putting the 2.6 back in it. The difference here is we're going turbo. Now, this is a pretty ancient turbo setup. It's got the CD Stromberg with the suck through, an old, I think it's a TO4 turbo, and this tiny little tube that it has to breathe through. So I looked at all that. We've got all the parts, but I have a sneaky suspicion that all these parts are going to go to another home. So what I want to do is to bring the car into the 20th century and fuel inject it, front mount intercooler, ball bearing turbo, we'll go internal wastegate and make it a really good job. So in order to do that, I've got a hold of a Magna EFI manifold. So this will give us the EFI and make it imminently tunable so we can make sure it doesn't detonate or anything like that. I have no idea what this motor is like. It has been rebuilt at some stage. I've got the sump off. I've taken a couple of caps off and had a look at the bearings. Bearings are absolutely perfect. Underneath the rocker cover is like it's brand new. So all we can do is put the turbo on it and give it a try. Now, one of the good things about the Magna manifold is that it just bolts straight on to the Sigma cylinder head. Perfect, no trouble at all. But there's a couple of little traps, and about 15 years ago I was doing one of these. The car came in, it already had the Magna manifold on it. Because these are front wheel drive, the thermostat housing is at the back of the manifold, it's down here. When the car came in, it had a long hose going off the back, off the thermostat housing, up forward and into the radiator. And the car arrived here because it had a blown head gasket. Now, the owner of the car bought the car, it blew the head gasket on the way home from buying it. He had a mechanic put a new head gasket on it, drove it for a couple of days, blew the head gasket again. And they couldn't understand why this kept blowing head gaskets. It's actually pretty simple. Because the thermostat housing is on the back, and that's the water port there for it, the water comes through the block, up, through the back of the head. It's got to try and force its way through this tiny little port in the back of the head here to come out through the thermostat housing. So what happens is the water's basically still fairly cold because it's only passed through the block. It gets to the back of the head. It's trying to get out through this little port. This one's blocked off where the water's supposed to come out. So the back of the head's cold, the front of the head's boiling hot, and it blows the head gasket. So what you'd have to do is weld up that port, move the thermostat housing. This water port here in the manifold actually lines up with this one here, but there's no thermostat housing on it. So I'm going to make a thermostat housing to go onto the front here so we get the proper water circulation. And that's the way to fit a Magna manifold onto the old Sigma head. Whilst the Magna manifold just bolts straight up to the Sigma head, that's not an issue. The problem is where the water goes in and out. Now, some years ago, I had a car here, it had a blown head gasket, and it had the Magna manifold on it. And nobody picked up the fact that the water system is wrong. This is normally where the thermostat housing sits on a Magna. It's at the back of the cylinder head. And this particular car, they'd simply run a hose over to the top of the radiator. Well, what happens is the water flows through the block, comes up through the back of the cylinder head, and comes straight out. No water flows up into the front of the cylinder head. But it gets worse. I'll just take this manifold off and I'll show you inside. The Sigma head only has a tiny little water port at the back of the cylinder head. The Magna manifold has a big port in it, and that's where the water goes, and that's where the thermostat housing sits. But all the water is now supposed to flow out through this little hole. So not only is the water flow restricted, but it can't get to the front of the cylinder head. So what needs to be done, and luckily we've already got this large port in the front of the Magna manifold. So what I've done here is I've cut a hole through this little rectangular section here. So you can probably see straight through that. I've cut the thermostat housing off the back of the manifold, and I'm going to move it to the front. So I've made up this little adapter, if you want to call it that, this little extension, which just gives me from round to square, and I'll just weld the original thermostat housing straight back on. Now, if it goes on in that position there, it comes around past the distributor, and there's not an issue with getting it into the car. So this is the original Sigma Turbo exhaust manifold, which I'm going to reuse. It's difficult to get a stainless steel manifold for one of these. This fits, it works. It's got pretty generous size runners and everything. I'll block off the external wastegate. That's a fairly easy job to do. The problem is the old-fashioned T4 bolt pattern. So I'm going to re-drill that because we'll probably end up with a 225 pattern on there with a ball bearing turbo. So I'll have to set that up in the milling machine. It's a fairly simple job. Re-drill it and we'll be able to bolt a late style turbo on it. So a few weeks have passed since the last part of the video, and in that I was talking about the water system. I've had a little change of mind of where the thermostat housing is going to go, and instead of trying to run the hose out and around and under the distributor and trying to get it up here, if we could just take a straight shot across there, it's just one straight hose. So I was going to use this bit of thermostat housing that I cut off the back of the manifold. Decided not to use it, it's a bit rough, and so I made this up. Still got to grind this off to get the correct angle, but that will get welded on there. That will go into there, and then it'll just point straight at the radiator. However, this created another problem, and that is this wiring on the distributor. This is a Magna distributor, and the plug comes straight up. So that gave me another dilemma. So what I did, that's the lug that was cast onto this distributor originally. So I cut the lug off, made my own mounting plate for it. So now that pops on there, and I can put the wiring facing downwards. So with the wiring down, that can now come straight across there without fouling anything. I was a little bit concerned about the manifold and how tall it was, because when we test fitted the bonnet, boy, this throttle body came awfully close to the bonnet. So what I did, took it off, cut 30mm out of the height because there was a nice little straight section there, and that's dropped the height of the manifold for us by 30mm. Now we've got a ton of clearance on the bonnet without a worry. I'm using the original Sigma Turbo manifold, but the flange for it is a T4 flange, and of course the new turbo is T25 flange. So I made this adapter plate up. I know you can buy them, but this one had to be a little bit special. So it's about 20mm thick. I had to bevel the front edge off so we can get the oil return pipe to come off the turbo. So a bit of fiddly stuff there to actually adapt a late model turbo to one of these early model manifolds. So this is how the turbo looks now that it's on. We have to swivel the casings around and so forth to try and get all of the hoses. So we've got our oil supply hose here. That's our water hose, will go into the back of the manifold. We've got another water hose here, which is on the suction side, goes into the water pump. And then you can't see it, but from underneath there is the oil return, which is a big -10 fitting, which will take the oil back down into the sump. So our inlet side will come out of our air box here, which is cold air induction, and then I'll have to trim these hoses up, but we'll have our big 3-inch hoses there going in. On the exhaust side, I just bought one of these just off eBay. It's a V-band, so that'll go on the back. And the good thing about the V-band is that it actually gives us a little bit of wriggle room. So when the downpipe goes down, we can set it into whatever position we want. Intercooler's mounted up. When it's all bolted in, it is actually surprisingly solid, which is good. So we put elbows on each end of the intercooler to steer them in, just over the top of the chassis rails. And there's just another 90-degree bend to go in here. And that's pretty much our intercooler side of things all done. So the next major job, and I'll show you this in the next video, will be the wiring for the computer. Because we're fuel injected, obviously we need a computer. So that's all for this episode, and hopefully on the next one we will have everything wired up, might even have it running.